Hello, and welcome back to another Hello from the Hallowoods weekly Q&A stream, the first in a long while. We have been gone for Q&As for the last 4 months or so of the break, so it's good to be back, and it's also great to be back on the air. This break has been a longer one than we have taken for our previous seasons. Shockingly, we only had 3 to 4 weeks of wait time between seasons 1 and 2 and seasons 2 and 3. But a bit of a break was more required this time around, both because there are sort of other projects outside of Hello from the Hallowoods that need doing. A full round of novel edits happened during the months that we were gone. And on top of that, a little more time to brew than the other seasons required. For reasons that I think now are a little bit more obvious if you've listened to the first episode of season 4. So that said, it has been delightful to get a little bit more time to think ahead and plan and get things together for the show. Also, a lot more time to collaborate with guest actors and get certain things set up for the season. We have had two lovely guest actors join the very first episode of season 4, with my very own good dear sister, Libby Wellman, performing as Clementine Maidstone, reprising a role that she had in the they had in the earlier seasons before. And then on top of that, we have the wonderful Evan Michael Lee as Merrill Marr. So thrilled to have him stepping into those shoes as well. So we do have a couple of Q&A questions in the ask box that I will get around to. But for those of you who have waited patiently / anxiously / full of dread for the last many months of the break, thank you so much for sticking around, for enjoying the past seasons of the Hallowoods. And I hope you enjoy sort of where it's headed as we step into season 4, where many questions abound, I'm sure. And truth be told, here in this very first Q&A session of the season, there may be some things that I know there's many questions that are probably being asked by the audience right now. Part of that will be a natural discovery that you'll get to find out as the season goes on. So I won't spoil anything for what's to come here in the Q&A, but I will do my best to address whatever questions that we have so far. Yami in the chat says, I still volunteer to be Nick's therapist. Lord knows he needs one at some point. I'm sure that'll be a lovely plot arc someday if he makes it that long. So LM asks, what did you enjoy doing most during the break? Resting. Resting was it wasn't like a primary activity of the break. But I think the first month really was more time to decompress after really kind of struggling to continue like making the show at its current pace. The weekly, often 45 to 50-minute episodes definitely were a lot to keep up with in terms of the writing and the production. Overall, I'm very happy with how season 3 turned out. I think the trajectory felt pretty close to what I was hoping for, but it was, I think, maybe the most difficult season to produce so far, just in terms of workflow and time management and continuing to keep things going at the rate that they were. So I'm glad we crossed that finish line, and there were more breaks in season 3 than we had in previous seasons, but it was really good to have some time to kind of not focus on the weekly grind of the show for a little while. Get to enjoy the holidays and then come circling back to the show production. So rest was good. Also, again, other projects to work on. I think the novel edits took, I had budgeted, I think 1 month. It took closer to 2 to get through just a lot of sort of edits and overhauls and things to change and fix up. So it is back in the tennis court of the publishing industry. 100 Eyes in the Dark will be the first Hallowoods spin-off novel, tie-in novel type thing. So I am kind of waiting for news on what the next step is for that. Now that it's sort of back under review, so I will. You'll be the first to know, I'm sure, in probably one of these Q and A's when we get more news about it. But with that done, then it was time to switch back to working on the show proper, which has included really like a straight month of planning and writing and scheming for season 4, of writing guest lines and working with our guest actors to get a lot of the pre-recorded parts of the show together, and really like just get season 4 back on the road. There were also other little projects to do, but even stuff like a recap video does take like multiple days of planning and project time to put together. So there's just been a number of like things to get caught up with. Some of the things I had anticipated doing over the break still, I think, are in the works, but will be coming a little bit later. Overhauling our merch store is one I would really. The shop has barely updated in 2 years, 3 years. So, and a lot of the old like, this is the great downfall of using print on demand services. But sometimes you'll design something that's pretty cool, like a color changing mug, or we had for a very limited time, we had like little hiking water bottles, which felt appropriate for forest walks with a nice custom pattern. But eventually, print on demand dividers providers can shut down production of a certain product, and sometimes there's no equivalent. No one else makes a color changing mug, or no one else makes a hiking bottle of that description. So I don't love the aspect that sometimes a pretty cool piece of merch could just disappear out of the blue due to a supplier change. So there's a couple things I'd want to revisit about the merch shop. I was planning to do that during the break, but sometime during the next couple months instead probably is when that will show up. That said, other projects in the works. My love for the Moormeyer is out. That was a little collection. It's a tiny collection, but it's a cute collection of really like short stories and Valentine's cards that came out for Valentine's. And that is just a tiny crumb of Hallowoods canon, but it was so fun to make and do some funky little illustrations for. Um, Definitely more to come, I think, on the side of having these tiny little art or writing projects that are offered through the Patreon shop. That is a digital download. Is something that anyone can purchase, even if they're not a patron, for a couple bucks. But if you are a patron, you get it for free, which is a neat setup. I like that. Some people are dodgy about not wanting to be on the sort of payroll for a monthly subscription, and I can appreciate why. So, I like that that's an option. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more coming out of that. There are still requests for Hallowoods Tarot deck, and I would love to do it at some point. I have kind of a unorthodox way of doing it that I would really like to check out, but that's going to take a little more development time. So that's still in the furnace for now. Definitely the priority for the next little bit is just season 4 and continuing to write ahead on the show, as well as kind of finding the new weekly production routine, because we are a couple weeks ahead in terms of production, but there's going to be a weekly process to keep episodes coming. So we have 30 episodes in total for season 4. This is a bit of a shorter season, and I think that makes sense for what the format of this season is and what the focus of this season is. And then the caveat, or kind of the balance of that, is that hopefully we'll be able to return to a normal Hallowoods Halloween premiere for season 5. So technically, we'll see all of season 4 over the summer, have a couple weeks of break, maybe a month of break, and then be back in October for season 5, and continuing on. And lovely to see everyone in the chat, by the way. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, more questions out of my box of questions, and then if you do have questions you'd like for the stream as well, feel free to drop them in the chat. One of the things we're experimenting with during this season for Q&As in previous seasons, the Q&As have been locked to patrons exclusively, which is neat. I like that it gives the patrons a chance to ask questions and get their shine on. But at the same time, it it's a slim crowd of people who are Hallowoods patrons in general. So this season, we're experimenting with the idea of opening these up to the public, letting anyone attend, letting anyone drop questions in chat. And patrons have the unique privilege of having access to the ask box, or they can drop stuff in advance and make sure their questions don't get missed, and drop in questions even if they won't be there on the stream, that their questions don't get answered. So that's kind of why you could see this as a public link and why it's out there on the internet. They will continue to be for the rest of the season, and then we'll kind of see how it went and go from there. So Indigo asks 2 questions actually. Indigo also asks, welcome back, Mix Wellman. What was your favorite thing you did over the break? Yeah, resting pretty much covers it, I think. Let's see. There were some lovely hikes. Got to enjoy the holidays down in a little frozen Nova Scotia town called Mahone Bay, which is just a bunch of brightly colored pastel square cottages, but on the shore of an ocean blanketed in ice. So it was very, it was a unique Canadian aesthetic, but that was a lovely time. Other than that, just enjoying the winter and the rainy fog season here in Nova Scotia. The weather here is terrible in the best way. I get more fog here than I've ever seen in my life, which is perfect for my aesthetic. So Indigo also asks, I'd love to hear your plans for the tarot deck if you're willing to share at this point. Yes, so I can share a little bit about the direction that it will probably take. So I've got 2 different ideas, and they might end up combined into one sort of thing. And I won't give you too much at this point because not a lot of it is concrete yet. But the concept is possibly that one of the things I've really wanted to do is a Hallowoods RPG, or really like a Hallowoods storytelling game of sorts. But at the same time, a lot of podcasts have a bespoke RPG at this point. The Silt Versus, I'm told, has a wonderful one. Old Gods of Appalachia has one. Welcome to Night Vale is getting one published through Renegade Game Studios pretty soon. And the Magnus Protocol, I think, is doing an RPG, or the Magnus Archives, they might have an RPG. So there are just so many out there. And I definitely want to take just a slightly different approach, or do something that you can't get in every other game already. So to do that, we might see a storytelling RPG of sorts that uses a sort of an illustrated deck system that allows you to play the game. However, I would like it to be where this same deck eventually, as sort of all the expansions or all the pieces of it come out, possibly over a couple of waves, where at the end of all those expansions, you would have essentially one full tarot deck. And that would allow me to release content to you folks a little bit faster, because there is a lot of illustration that goes into a tarot deck. There's in the neighborhood of 70 or 80 cards, I believe. And all of those need lovely illustration on paper, and then they need a lot of editing to look as nice as they do digitally. There's card formatting involved. So probably over the next couple of months, you might see some essentially drafts or beta tests for a game along these lines that might be rolling out. And then, we'll kind of edit things and make sure it's getting play tested more or less before doing anything like an actual print edition. So you can probably find, when that shows up, the early drafts of this will probably be available on the Patreon as well, much like my love for the Moormire currently is. So that's a little bit more about it. Essentially, for those of you who are just interested in a tarot deck, give me a couple like waves of illustrations, but you'll have a complete one. And I would try to get that actually as a physical real world product you can make at some point. Otherwise, if you're here for the RPG side, I'll be trying to serve both those audiences at once and see how that turns out. So we have one more question in the patron ask box, and then I can get to some of the questions I see popping up in chat. Theodora asks, or Theo asks, welcome back. Without spoilers, of course, what are you most excited about in this upcoming season? I'm excited for a change of pace. I don't get me wrong. I love what's been done with the show. It's been a beautiful arc of 140 episodes at this point. However, after 3 seasons and 140 times of that same format, minus a couple of like format break episodes, I'm definitely excited to try something new and push the show a little bit harder than it has been going in terms of trying new things. I understand that new things are sometimes scary, to try or to listen to. It's a jump to accept when a show that has been so committed to the same routine, like suddenly breaks that routine and does something else. But it's opening up a lot of fun writing possibilities and a lot of new places that I can take the story. Some of the things that we're seeing in this season have really been in the works since the start of season 3. So it's really fun to get to start to pay off some of the things that have been sort of set up well in advance, to explore a little bit more with characters that have been, kind of on the sidelines so far. And to get to write some new corners of the world that we haven't necessarily seen yet. So I'm excited for the scope to keep expanding, and for also, in as much as there is a mystery overtone to this season, there's also a lot of mysteries that you as the listener are piecing together as time goes on. And so like more than anything, I think the most joy I'm going to get out of this season, outside of some really fun characters, there's some great stuff on the way for you very shortly. But in the meantime, one of the things I get the biggest kick out of is just seeing people try to piece it together. I love seeing the Wednesday feed light up with people trying to assemble all the information that they've got and coming up with wild theories and guesses as to what's going on. And that will probably continue for a little bit as you keep getting pieces of information, as you can keep like starting to assemble your red string board more or less. So I'm really looking forward to the listener reactions and the slow piecing together of everything that you've got, which is kind of a detective experience in its own right, which is great. So I'm going to have a blast with that. Absolutely. I think other than that, the other thing that I'm really excited about is that we were able to go a lot harder on voice actors this season than we usually do. We usually have, at least in the past 3 seasons, every season we've had maybe like 1 or 2 major guest appearances and then 2 or 3 like small voice bits from various people. There's been a couple characters we've had on the air very briefly. Anderson Faust, Velma Burfield, Angie from season 3. And then a couple people who get really more of a highlight, like Daisy Guevara as Melanie Flores, Steve Shell as Old Afterclaps, Harlan Guthrie steals it as Dashiell Spade. But that said, like we've tinkered a little bit with the format, and that's going to allow for a little bit more guest voices in this season, which I'm very excited about. Some of these performances that are coming to you are just phenomenal. So the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the guest work is done much more in advance than the rest of the show is, because it's easy for me to write and record on a moment's notice. It's not so much for guest voice actors who have weeks and months of scheduling to work out. So all of the guests, a lot of the guest appearances for this season have already been recorded. They're already written. They're already done. Um, which means that like I'm sitting on all these great monologues and performances and aspects, but you won't get them yet. You'll have to wait weeks and weeks, which is aggravating. But it's going to be so good as you get more bits and pieces of the story and really put it all together. So I'm full of excitement for this season, and I hope as it rolls on that you enjoy it. I've got a couple questions here in the chat too, so I'll get to some of those. Many greetings to the various folks popping in. Yet it is asks, silly question, but would you have a favorite character to write for / voice? You're so good at making each character so distinct. Well, very heartfelt. Thank you. As far as favorite characters to write for and voice, um, there's a couple different answers to this. Just I like different characters for different reasons. Um, I it's gonna sound terrible. It's gonna sound terrible, but I miss Solomon purely for how much fun it was to voice this terrible, shouty old man with his accent. No one quite as austere or as preacherly has shown up again. My voice would be destroyed every Solomon episode there was, but his was a fun one to do at the time. One of my ongoing favorites is, of course, Diggory Graves. They're probably one of my favorites to write for. I love their character. They're very near and dear to the heart of the show for me in many ways. So I always enjoy getting a Diggory scene. And their voice really evolved into something quite pleasant as well. So I really do enjoy them. Mix Morel is always a favorite. Just he's a little bit. I don't know that you'll meet many real people that have a voice quite like his sort of uh, exaggerated effect, but I love his mannerisms. I love any mushroom character, so I'm always a fan of that. I think another would be Mr. Raven and Mr. Writing Desk. I do love that duo, just because they ping pong off each other. And there's a lot of conflict, a lot of bickering, and their two tones are very different from each other. So it makes for some very dynamic, like back and forth conversations. And you know, well, let's see. Getting into some of the other questions in the chat. I can only imagine the vocal warm-ups required for all the different voices. It's a struggle at times. It's a struggle at times. There are some characters that are much worse than others. Solomon was terrible to try and voice. Big Mikey is a difficult one. Rothagroth, the Decaying Crown, he's a tough one. His voice essentially is just trying to be Unicron, but it's I think the deepest voice in the show. And the Omen is also very shouty. You can only do Omen for so long. So like there's a season 1 episode I think that has the Omen, Solomon, and Big Mikey in it. And like burning through all 3 of those took me out for like a couple days. Let's see. Harlan is so insanely talented, it's scary. You'd think the voice acting in this show it's tolerable, but the voice acting in Malevolent, it doesn't hide behind any false pretenses. You know, at the end of the day, I can shake us. I can hide behind the narrative frame of the Hallowoods, and I can say, well, it's really Nicky Nick reading you the story. You know, not everyone sounds just like their real world self. You know, if 2 people sound a bit similar, well, you know, it's just not how they really sound in the universe. Harlan goes for it. Every voice is not only Harlan's voice, but it's the real voice of that character. It's wonderfully distinct. Um, he does a gorgeous job with that show. Hart, if you ever are a looking to get into podcasting, looking to get into sound design, Harlan Guthrie projects take sound design and take environmental sound design for podcasts to the next level. Especially Divisor, which is a bloody and disturbing listen. So I would take that with a grain of salt. That's a several episode sci-fi mini series that he did. but the sound design in that show is unlike anything you've ever heard. It's phenomenal. Um, what was your favorite hero Ikera? Heroic Arrow, there it is, asks, what was your favorite theory about series 1 through 3? Hmm. I think my favorite theory about series 1 through 3. It's I think it's hard to say what my favorite theory about it was. I think obviously I loved a lot of the scheming, people trying to figure out if Marilmar was really gone, what kind of direction the show was going to take with that, whether the mission north would work out or not. I really that speculation was a lot of fun to see as season 3 rolled on. Just because it's fun to see where people land in their feelings. And the way I see it is, if about half the people are right, then you're doing the foreshadowing correctly. And if none of them see it coming, then it's a pleasant surprise. But the stories are often built in such a way that the astute or the people with a good intuition for it can feel where it's coming before it happens. And I know that's something that in the modern era, developers, storytellers tend to shy away from. There's a lot of film and television that actually gets changed because people were calling out what happens too early. They were like, "No, we got to change it. We can't be predictable." But there's a balance between being predictable and delivering a story that feels intuitive. And you want to strike a balance between doing what the story feels like it should and subverting people's expectations and delivering them surprises and things that sort of take them off guard. And so I can't. I have to say the Hallowoods is more of a exercise or more of a space to practice that than anything. But it is fun to play with. Let's see. Will we ever see how the world outside of North America has been affected? Yes. I could say that much. One of the reasons we haven't touched it a lot is because there's a lot of seasons of this show. And also I have lived in places outside of North America, but I'm also less practiced in them. I would. It takes, I think, a little bit more caution to discuss how certain parts of the world have been affected and plan for that and tell a story about that versus Florida. You could be pretty cruel to Florida in a narrative and no one minds. But that said, and to a certain extent, especially early on here, one of the founding reasons for the show's setting was that I kept asking Canadians what their plan would be if there was an apocalypse or a zombie apocalypse or an event like that, and every single Canadian I talked to was like, "Yeah, I'd drive north here from Ontario, and I'd go north, and I'd be up north, the Ontario wilderness. No one would bother you." And it was like, if every person's saying this, you're all going to meet up there together, and then you won't be alone. You'll be there with all the other apocalypse preppers. And that was really where the idea of these communities like the Scout Post came from. So there was a certain element of wanting to focus on that in these early seasons, especially. But as time goes on, I would love to explore more places with the show and start to take a look at how the world, and particularly parts of the world that weren't sort of immediately bought out by a mega corporation, would handle this instead. So there is more space that I've been hoping to just save for a while because we've got still a good many seasons ahead of us. Fingers crossed. Let's see. This is Strawberry Jampire says, let's see. Just trying to get in the order. Femme Fatale says, how many drawings did you end up sending out during that time when you were doing art requests? I really loved the drawing I got of Moth flying around a lamp. That was such a fun one to do. That was a hilarious prompt, and I really love when people have these specific or kind of funny choices for the art commissions. Let's see. I think there was a period about a year before this most recent batch of commissions where I had put out, a link for commission orders, but they were a limited run, and I think it was limited to 30 commissions. This time, it was essentially commissions will be open up to a certain date, and then after that date, the link is taken down. And 80 people submitted for commissions during that time. So I had over 80 commissions to do over that month. And actually, come to think of it, that that took up a good like couple weeks of time as well. Just drawing 80 hand-drawn ink illustrations and getting those all packaged and mailed and addressed correctly. Thankfully, I haven't heard a lot of complaints of them not showing up. I think I've only had to redraw one and send it along. So that's also good. But yes, that was lovely. I probably will. I mean, commissions are fun to do. They're fun for me to make. You all seem to also enjoy them. And it's a pretty simple way to raise funds for the show, which, it is always a present concern. So I'm sure they'll pop up again from time to time, but I'll open the next batch when I'm not like actively trying to generate some months of content as well. Let's see. Strawberry Jampire says, this is making me wonder who the easiest to voice are. There are some characters that don't require very much, to be honest with you. Riot, Percy, Olivier are all a step removed. Definitely, they've each got their own little mannerisms, and that's, I think, gotten better as time goes on, or just as you voice a character more and more, you start to get more of their like what separates them from other voices. So all those are still fairly distinct at this point. But there are some characters who are pretty straightforward. Arnold, Clara, just not a far cry, those ones. Let's see. Zoe says, just started Malevolent. Sound design is genuinely so good, even as someone who usually prefers someone telling you a story around a campfire style podcast. It's interesting because different people have different tastes. And so, the type of podcast that one person likes, where it's just one narrator for the most part reading along, like some people seek that out intentionally and they really love that. Other people really hate it and they wish for like a more dynamic, more true to life, sounds experience. Unfortunately, we've settled on the side of tediousness, and despite some pretty cool guest acting this season, we'll continue that for the most part. Let's see. And lovely story to people hanging up their commissions. So I think we've about run our course for today. So thank you so much, everybody, for showing up. For those of you in the chat who got commissions, I'm so glad you enjoy your art. And thank you so much for tuning back into season 4. More Q&As to come, and another episode Wednesday, and every Wednesday after that for the rest of the summer. So until next time, enjoy, and I look forward to seeing the reactions coalesce as season 4 comes along. Take care and see you around the bend.